So let's talk a little bit about the desktop design. So as Andrew was saying, you don't want to get lost in the weeds and get totally caught up in details, but there are some key decision points you want to look at in this phase in order to understand how that's going to affect your budget. So Andrew, do you want to just give a little bit of an overview of those decision points?
Sure. There's a lot of things to take a look at on the desktop design from a technical perspective, but we're putting together a slide kind of talking about the budget, just some of the things that people want to consider. First is, which Windows 7 features do you want to include? And that becomes important as you're looking at things like hardware requirements. Do you want the multimedia experience? What else is going to be in there? 32-bit versus 64-bit is a big one. It could go either way. If you choose 32-bit for Windows 7, things are going to go smoother because you're going to have better application compatibility in a 32-bit system. If you go 64-bit, your rollout is going to take longer because you are going to have more application compatibility issues. On the flip side, if you do 64-bit now, 2 or 3 years from now, you'll be in a good position to take advantage of applications that are written to take advantage of a 64-bit platform. What we see is it really depends on the customer. A lot of people are going to 32-bit, but there's also pressure from up above that says, hey, if we're going to do it, let's do it. Let's just bite the bullet now. A couple of things that tend to sneak up. A lot of times we see customers when they're about to embark on this also looking at drive backup options. Do we want to be backing up the local desktop? Is that something that we want to incorporate into this project? There's a significant cost to that. Remote desktop options. Is there a VDI in the mix? We're looking at Citrix Remote Desktop. What are the cost implications of that? Encryption, there's native encryption tools that come with Windows 7. There are better tools that are third-party that are available. There's a cost to buy those tools and implement them, and then there's also the ongoing support cost. Supporting in a fully encrypted environment, it just it puts more of a stress in some ways on the help desk and support people, and training them and how to use that, and training the users and how to use that. So it's just something to consider from a budgeting perspective. I guess as you look at all these things that you want to review, it's just the more complexity you add and the more things that you're going to change, the more it's going to cost. As you look at decision points, just a couple of things to consider. First and foremost is who are the stakeholders in the Windows 7 project? Me and Glenn were talking, we were running through this, and a lot of times it comes down to, you could build the desktop, you can make it look and feel the way the IT department thinks it should look and feel, and then you pilot it out to a high-profile user, or a partner at a law firm, for instance, and they don't like it, and then you have to kind of go back to the drawing board and make changes. And the thing with the Windows 7 desktop is once you lock down that desktop, you don't really want to change it because now you're packaging your applications to work on it, you're testing everything on it. So you want to make sure you identify who the stakeholders are early so that you can lock that image down as quickly as possible and not have to kind of go back and spend more money on development and testing cycles. And then also what's going to be included as part of this project. So there is universally a tendency to want to say, hey, listen, if we're touching the desktop, if we're putting this much of a disruption on the user community, what else should we do as part of this? Certainly, you're going to have to upgrade applications so that they're compatible to Windows 7. You might be upgrading major line of business applications, which has a cost. Are you upgrading network infrastructure? Are you upgrading your security? Compliance is becoming more and more prevalent these days. So, are we putting in tools to manage compliance as part of this? So it's just important to understand, hey, what is included as this Windows 7, and then what do we want to do in addition to the whole effort? And then the last point I put on here is just identifying who will be responsible for hardware purchases. So most customers that we see need to replace some hardware in order to support Windows 7 and the new robust tool set that they're going to put on top of that, whatever the line of business application is or whatnot. And there's just a question of, is that done as a normal lease cycle? Is that done as part of the IT department's budget? Or is that something that can be pushed right down into the business unit and let them pay for that as part of their typical hardware cycle? So just a few things to consider as you're looking at the desktop design.
And Glenn, I'm sure when you look at this, you can see the budgetary implications of all these decisions.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Each component is going to have a different dynamic on what should be included and what should be left out. Just going back to what Andrew was saying about hardware purchases, Most companies have a refresh cycle for their equipment, whether that's tied to a lease cycle or whether it's a rotation plan just because technology is progressing. If you're in the process of doing that anyway, that's a cost that you don't need to consider as part of your Windows 7 budget because it's a natural course of business.
Right, and again, there's also components of this, like Andrew was saying, that once you define the scope of the project, some of these initiatives, like even encryption, could possibly be conceived as a discrete project that's part of Windows 7 but doesn't have to be tied directly to Windows 7. So these are things that are important in defining the scope at this